Welcome to Chat with the Lawyer. I'm your host, Walla Blagay, and today we are honored to have Ms. Gwen Marie Davis Hicks from GDH Law. And we're going to talk about an important issue of developing businesses in the county. Many people don't know what business to start, how to do it legally, and Ms. Davis Hicks is going to tell us more about it. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
All right.
I feel so honored and privileged to be here.
All right. So tell us about how you got into your practice.
Oh, not a problem. Hard work, dedication, and having a drive to want to help clients, business clients, personal injury clients as well. Locally in Prince George's County, I'm also licensed in D.C. So started when I finished law school. I graduated from the University of Baltimore in 2006 and did a clerkship from there. Worked at a small firm, continued and worked with another firm with a couple other partners there, and later went out on my own and formed GDH Law. And we've been working really hard, taking care of clients, treating them like they're our only client, and building one client at a time to the point where now we have 2 attorneys in the office and a great staff and a great firm if you ever needed a law firm.
That's really great news. You look so young. Did you start practicing at 10?
Well, thank you. That makes me, you made my day, so to say the least.
Well, let's get into the information for businesses. Now, somebody wants to start a business. They're a small business. They want to start it on their own. Where did they go legally? What should they start thinking about?
Well, I would have them, come into our office and talk, because there's several different entities that could be appropriate for the business, depending on what their needs are. Do they have employees? Is it just them? Where do they see themselves in 5 years? What tax implications, are they, trying to protect, and things like that, or some of the initial questions that we would want to have. Because, there's LLCs, there's corporations. Do they want an S Corp versus a C Corp? Is it just them? Would a sole proprietorship benefit them? Those are some of the common questions that we would have. But after we go through that, we would strongly recommend, at that point, to make sure that they incorporate, and to do it with a law firm that knows the pros and cons of each entity. Instead of sometimes people do it the frugal way, and sometimes Google online and try to find these free forms, and you can get LegalZoom and things like that, but they might not be state specific. And I see a lot of times, sometimes clients get forms, incorporate themselves, and later come back, and it's more costly on the back end. They could be in the wrong entity. It's not state specific. Their form couldn't hold up in court. And they're in a hot water, at that point. So it's best to come on the beginning stages, the infancy stages, and talk with an attorney to see which entity, to get the proper forms, licenses, things of that nature is best for the client.
So let's start with that. Now, if you want to decide to do a sole proprietorship, what are some of the things that you should be thinking about when they come to your firm? Someone decides, I want to make a sole proprietorship. Explain that.
Well, sole proprietorship, one, obviously, is just that one person there. They might not want to hire for future, just them, running the company themselves. That might be, an option, for them. But if it's maybe more or just them, I would recommend potentially maybe an LLC. But it kind of depends. It's kind of hard to give
What does it depend on?
Good question. It depends on, the tax implications, what they want. Like for instance, for example, a LLC is a hybrid between a corporation, and it's called a limited liability corporation. I later started, and it could be a way, in that sense, for tax savings. For example, you can write deductions with an LLC. For example, a company, not an accountant by any means, but a company who has an LLC could write deductions for gas, travel expenses, things of that nature. Everything that they do, meals, restaurant expenses, office supplies could be deducted, at the end of the year.
Can they not do that with sole proprietorships?
You can, but you have more taxes, you have more leniency on an LLC, if it makes any sense. Okay. It's not a hybrid, and
what is the leniency? Explain why a LLC will be different from a sole proprietorship and leniency in taxes.
Well, again, I don't want to kind of go too far in terms of the accountant, point of view, because obviously I always tell every client to make sure you talk to your tax, accountant per se. But it's just some of you can't write off as many deductions, in short, with an S corp. Sorry, not with the S corp, with a sole proprietorship. And if you want to grow and have employees in the future, it could run into a challenge.
Okay, so a sole proprietorship is most likely not the entity that you're going to hire 12 people.
Correct.
Okay.
Or you want to have a partner later.
Okay.
And also a sole proprietorship, a lot of times too, leaning away from the tax issue, you want to look at the governing documents per se. For example, with an LLC, you're going to have operating agreements that are going to govern you, whereas that's not going to be there with a sole proprietorship.
Right.
And I tell every business client, if me and you were opening up a business together, it's going to be successful. We're going to be the best business client, the best business out there, the fastest growing client, as everyone wants to say in Prince George's County, is what everyone goes into every business hoping so. But I tell everybody to take a step back. And I tell them, have the operating agreement in place if it's an LLC. Do all of that stuff ahead of time, because people never think anything's going to go bad. And it might not go bad. Somebody, God forbid, could die. Or the business, one person decides they want to go a different direction. What happens with the assets? Because it's better to have it in writing up front, because I see a lot of times, too, where clients come to us and want their business dissolved. What do we have to go from? Because at that point in time, it gets really ugly. So that's one thing, too, that I tell everybody up front. Get the operating agreement. If it's a corporation, get the bylaws in place, or the partnership agreement.
So what does go back to operating, what does an operating agreement include?
It includes everything, the day-to-day operations, what happens if the business dissolves, if one partner decides to, leave the business, how will we wind down? That's the important things as well, too. The day-to-day, operations of the business.
So do you write that stuff out?
Everything in detail. Detail. And it's best to have an attorney do it as well, too, again, because it's state specific. You can go online, and obviously you can find forms, but I highly discourage that, because sometimes we think of things that a typical business owner just might not think of, or it's not state specific, for Maryland.
Give an example of something that's state specific that you might not see in a form.
Okay. Well, forms are general. For example, Maryland has laws, whereas in Idaho, or it might be just a federal case. Versus in Maryland, the business has to, let me think of a specific example that we've had. We've had it where a client came into our office, got a form on LegalZoom, and it wasn't specifically with the detail of the operation agreements per se, but it was more so where they got a form and later went to court, and it could not stand because of that. And that got into a little bit more detail. I'm kind of jumping to some different subjects, but it got into more detail in terms of an employee signed what you want to call a noncompete. So this business grew, got employees, but had the employees sign a noncompete, meaning the employee could not work in any business, they said, in a mile radius of 200 miles. Now, Maryland is not a big state. Maryland is not going to uphold a non-compete.
What, 200 miles?
200 miles.
I see.
That basically means that person cannot work in the state of Maryland ever again.
Right.
So those are the things that businesses, yes, we set up entities. We help employers with hiring, making sure that they actually, hire employees, not necessarily when they hire employees, but that they do it, have employment manuals in place, have the employee manuals above board, making sure they're not just, okay, let me get this form offline so that we can have the employees all sign non-competes and something like that you're not even thinking of.
Right, so you would draft the non-compete.
Correct, for the employee. Make sure the employee handbooks are above board. Harassment issues.
So explain why having those, because this is also a business issue too.
Yes.
If you draft up a employee manual, why is that important from a legal perspective?
Extremely important, because you want to make sure you have the main issues that sometimes you might just think, okay, let me get a general one. Harassment issues, things you don't even think of. God forbid you have sexual harassment issues on the job. You don't have that in your manual as to what to do. You know, you're supposed to complain to the supervisor. Have that done. It's not documented. If it goes to the EEOC, or we're getting into federal issues now, or even other employment issues, they're going to look and see, what did you have in place? What were your hiring procedures? Document what happened. Employee complains, or an employee is terminated. Was it an at-will employee? Is it a contractual employee? Those are the things, too. As a business, yes, we set up the entities. Now you want to hire employees. You want to have all of your ducks, in a row. Correct.
Okay. Well, you know what? We're going to learn more about the differences between LLC and corporations, and also about employee agreements when we get back. This has been such good information, Ms. Davis-Hicks. So please stay with us so you can learn more. Thank you.
To someone going through a difficult time, one simple act has the power to make a difference. Hello.
Hi, Dad.
Reach out to the veterans in your life today. Let them know they're not alone.
Never look a howler monkey in the eye. We built the entire library out of recycled bottles. Fried ants are delicious.
We finished a clinic in a rainstorm.
Really?
That was a confidence builder.
My students actually ended up teaching me. So I learned this dance. I'll show you this dance.
Yeah. In la keg, a la king.
The classroom was more of a class tent. I think managing a sales team is tough. Try working with 5 different villages. My alarm clock was a rooster. Beans for breakfast, beans for lunch, beans for dinner. We ate a lot of beans. I learned a 3rd language.
My seatmate on the bus was a goat.
Always include the village elders. Always. My morning commute was by canoe. After 2 months, I was ready to quit, but after 2 years, I didn't want to leave.
I didn't know I had it in me.
Turn 2 years of service into a lifetime of experience.
Welcome back to Chat with the Lawyer. I'm your host, Walla Blagay, and we're here with Ms. Davis-Hicks talking about some of the importance in business law and employment. We were just talking about employment, so we're going to jump back into it. So we were talking about why the employee manuals are very important. So
Yes.
Go back into that.
Oh, yes. Employee manuals are extremely important to have lined up and reviewed or even drafted by an attorney. One of the first things, if there's ever an employee issue, the first thing that employment lawyers are going to look at is the employee manual. How was it drafted? It's basically what the employees are supposed to go by. The employee manual and the handbook. So just making sure that everything is dotted, T's are crossed, is extremely important to protect yourself from lawsuits in the future, because it's something that can be extremely avoidable If it's just simply,
Have you had cases where people have used the manuals came up? Can you talk about some of the cases?
Sure. Yes. One of the first things, again, that comes up is this type of, employee. Is your employee an at-will employee versus a contractual employee? Are some employees at-will? Are others contractual? Depending on the issue. That's important as well, too, because if one of the first people that are going to be knocking down your door is going to be the employment office. Somebody is terminated. And why would they terminate it? If there's an at-will employee, obviously they could be terminated at any time, as long as it wasn't for discriminatory issues, as well, too. So just having something even as simple in your handbook is making sure that you do not discriminate for race, gender, orientation, as well too, is important.
And those you use in the EEOC cases?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, that will come up, as well too. So making sure, that the employee handbooks, manuals are drafted appropriately, is key. And trying to think of, discriminatory issues. Is very important. Harassment issues, what to do. Right. If an employee is harassed, having that spelled out, is important as well.
And also, let us know, what about employment contracts? Do you draft that up for your clients?
Yes, because there's a lot of times there's employee contracts, and sometimes it comes into place too, where an employer might actually hire subcontractors as well too, 1099 employees who might not necessarily be an employee.
Are those independent
Correct.
Contractors?
Independent contractors. So you want to make sure that you have that in place too. For example, if you're an employer and you get a contract from, from another source, you want to make sure that if you do hire other if you have employees as well as subcontractors, that they have contracts in place too. Because at the end of the day, beginning of the day, you're responsible, as the business who has the contract to make sure that you hold up your end of the bargain. So that's important too. And if you are a subcontractor for a contractor, to make sure that you have a contract in place as well too. We can review and draft those as well. Because, essentially it's a whole different agency law comes into place as well too, right. With that. So right. Even though, like I said, your employees are essentially agents for you. So you want to make sure that they're acting in behalf of you. If you're a painting company, you want to make sure that your employees have on the uniform, they work for Joe Blow Painting Company, and make sure that they are acting as a reflection of you. Because if anything goes wrong with the employees or even the subcontractors, you want to make sure that you covered up your end.
Right. Now let me ask you, there is a movement from states to focus on the misclassification of workers, and this is the independent contractors versus the employees, and that's been a big issue because a lot of small businesses are actually some of the biggest violators of taking people who are supposed to be employees and classifying them as independent contractors. So can you explain that and how you address that with your clients?
Sure. Well, a subcontractor is essentially independent. That's the word. They do not work for you. However, they could represent your company. Whereas an employee is a W-2 employee, whereas a subcontractor is considered a 1099 employee. Different tax brackets, and I'll jump into it briefly so I don't get caught on that, but a 1099 employee is a subcontractor. They're not a W-2 employee. They essentially, a W-2 employee could make $1,000 a week, but you would take out taxes for that W-2 employee. Whereas a 1099 employee, it's essentially they make $1,000 a week, no taxes are taken out, and they deduct their own taxes, whereas the W-2 employee, you have to take out payroll taxes, business taxes, and so forth.
Now, the 1099 is not an employee, right?
Correct.
Okay, so they're just like someone that works with
A
you.
subcontractor is a technical word. They work for you. But you could have that, but you want to make sure that if the employee is acting on your behalf, they're working over, they're doing employee type duties. They don't try to, I guess, slide it under to save money, you know, as a business, not to have to pay employee taxes, payroll taxes, X, Y, and Z, to have a subcontractor that can later come back to bite you if you have a subcontractor who is in fact an employee.
And where does it unemployment, right?
Correct. You'll find out then. Well, they'll ask the questions. If you ever had the unemployment office contact you, they will interview your subcontractor employee, and they'll interview you and do a phone interview with both you and the employee. So it's best, if you're in doubt, talk to an attorney to figure out which classification your employee falls under. But if they're, you know, working for you every day, doing activities, not, you know, a subcontractor is like occasionally here and there, it's a big difference.
Right.
You know, if they're working for you every day, it's your employee. And treat it as such. Don't cut corners, because I'm telling you, it can later come back to bite you.
And unemployment, do they have to pay unemployment for a independent contract? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, but you have to pay unemployment for an employee.
Yeah. So didn't mean to cut you off earlier, but yes, if it's a subcontractor, the unemployment taxes you do not have to pay, versus a employee you do. Okay.
All right, so that's good. So now let's go into the corporation side. What's the difference between an LLC and a corporation?
Well, an LLC is something that's important because it's a hybrid between a corporation. But one of the good things about an LLC, for example, is you have to have, as I mentioned earlier, operating agreements, versus a corporation. You have more like lost the word, but bylaws to govern you. Also, too.
And what's the difference between an operating agreement and bylaws, as in what it entails?
Well, bylaws, you have to have a board, minutes. It's very corporate. It's a corporation structure. You have to have meeting minutes, this and that. So anything that happens has to fall under the bylaws. There's a board of directors. There's typically treasurers, a president of the board. There's certain treasurer, secretary, and president. Those are like typically the standards that are on, the board of directors. You have to have certain meeting times, special meetings. There are different things that have to occur with that. Also, too, there's S Corp and a C Corp as well, too. Well, an S Corporation typically is not for small businesses. A lot of people think that, but versus a C Corp was typically, a lot of times larger corporations do that. But an S Corp, you can actually you could actually have your taxes go separate, if that makes any sense. Let me try to explain it, make it easy for like the layperson. You could deduct your taxes, through an S Corp. So if it's a small business, you can kind of have your taxes separate as well, too. I'm not sure if I'm saying that properly. Maybe on a pro. Maybe.
But so then, does the corporation have no taxes and the S Corp has all the taxes?
No. A corporation is, S Corp is a corporation.
I see. Okay.
Yes, it's just different tax brackets, and I would typically have an accountant kind of go over that with you. But different tax implications for an S Corp.
Are you taxed more for S Corp or less?
Not more, not less, but you could actually have it separate from your personal taxes. You would yes.
Is a corporation taxed differently than an LLC?
Yes. An LLC, as I was saying earlier, you could deduct your personal expenses, from an LLC of the business.
Okay. All right. So S Corp, they only tax the corporation. They don't tax you personally, right?
Correct.
What about sole proprietorship?
Sole proprietorship, that is something too that I want to just clarify. You asked a question earlier, one of the differences between the sole proprietorship and the LLC. With the sole proprietorship, I could say that it's good potentially for a person that maybe just them, doesn't have any employees, but one of the things too where we can probably steer a lot of people towards the LLC is because you could be personally liable.
Right. Which would mean what happened if someone sues your corporation, your sole proprietorship, what happens?
You're personally liable. Whereas in an LLC, one of the key things too, I probably should have stated this earlier, you want to make sure you have your business incorporated. Don't cut corners of that as well too, because with an LLC, you're not personally liable. Mm-hmm. My business, for example, is an LLC. So something happens, God forbid, they're not going to come after my home unless I do something which is called piercing the corporate veil. Okay. Piercing the corporate veil simply means fraud is not involved. Which is, if it's fraud, we can't help you. As long as you protect your, conducting business in a proper manner, something happens and you're sued, you're not personally liable, which is a very important point that I want to say. So if you are a business or thinking about becoming a business in the state of Maryland, protect yourself, get incorporated before you start conducting business. And one of the things, too, I want to mention to you, I hope I'm not running out, but what I want to say is make sure you keep your business current. Don't let it get forfeited. Right. Every year, the State Department of Assets and Taxations will send you an annual bill to make sure that your LLC is like $300 typically annually as you have to pay to renew that. Mm-hmm. If you don't renew that, your business will say forfeited. And you'll think that you have your business incorporated, and then they come after you as well. You say, well, hey, I thought I was incorporated. Right. You didn't keep your business current. Do the property taxes as well, too. There's a lot you want to do to try to keep your business, above board. I know we're running out of time. So.
Well, this is good. We're going to have you come back on and explain some more of these processes so that business owners will know about it. So as you all can see, we are getting great information. Now, if they want to contact you, Ms. Davis-Hicks, how do they contact you?
They can go to our website, GDHlawfirm.com. On there, you can send us an email or call us directly at 301-769-6835. 301-769-6835. Thanks for having us.
And thank you so much. And if you want to know more about the show, please visit us at www.chatwiththelawyer.tv. Thank you and Merry Christmas.
I've never been the type to ask for help, but I had enough.
Thank you for calling the Veterans Crisis Line. How can I help you?
Life still has its challenges, but my family and I can deal with them better now. Veterans Crisis Line. It's your call.